This is Chapter 3, Part 2, as I continue to talk to you more about classes and instance for this thing. Picking up from the string from Chapter 2, string classes, you can have all sorts of different string classes that actually takes place with it, with all different data types with it. But one of the things I want to talk to you about is the instance of all are all shared by the same design. Each instance has its own attributes and methods where it's defined as the string class with it. Okay, so classes are defined represented by a single concept of service with it. So here is an access modifier. This is important. This is a test question I want you to know with it. An access modifier is a Java keyword that indicates how a field or a method can be accessed with it. So how can you access these fields or get into the methods? Remember how we use the dot syntax of an object to access its method? How do you access its field? Well, there are three ways you can that Java has access modifier. It's public, private, and protected. We don't talk about protected in here. We talk about public and private. Protected is a data structure term that when we talk about and later on a lot of security that deals with credit card transaction that we talk about. But for now, just bear with me. For this course, we're going to cover public and private. Here's what I want to introduce to you, and this is very important for you to understand. It's mainly the reason why we have these three Java access modifiers because of data hiding, which means that the critical data are stored inside of an object is protected from a code outside of the object with it. This is accomplished by the Java private. Okay, so if you use the private with it, it protects the data inside by going through another method. You have to go through another method to get into the data for that. Of course, when something's defined as public, everything is accessible as well. But I do want you to know about the private with it. Alright, so make sure you understand that little definition I just shared with you. It's key. The key thing about it is data hiding. Next, let me talk to you about this. This is where these three things that I just want to mention to you about. Do know public, do know private, do know protected. These are three types of access modifier. These access modifier states that any of the classes that can be accessed through the resources. That's public. Private, this access modifier indicates that the only data within the class can be accessed the resource. And of course the third one is protected. This modifier indicates that only the classes that can be currently packaged or class lower than the hierarchy can access this resource with it. Again, we don't handle the protected. We only do public and private at this level of this course with it. Now, coming down here, I do want to bring your attention to this next one right here. So, classes are needed to use by other classes are typically made public. So, if you make something like public class, okay, public class, and the name of your file, same name as your class, classes that are needed by other classes are typically made public. If there are more than one class in a file, only one may be public and it must match the file name. Hence, remember the hello world we did with it? So here's what we're talking about right here. So the access modifier, this is what public or private or protected class, and we had class name is the hello world. This is the same name as your file. Remember we did the system out print line. We did hello world in here. Okay. Now let's talk about encapsulation. This is very important concept that I need for you to understand. Encapsulation. Classes should be as limited in the scope as needed to accomplish this goal. Okay. If you remember the scope, things that happens within the curly brackets within the function with it. If things are defined as local or things are defined as global, okay, it's the scope of that variable. Each class should contain all that is needed to operate for it to operate with it as well. Enclose the proper attributes and methods inside the single classes is called encapsulation. I need for you to know that definition, encapsulation with it. So all enclosed with the proper attributes and methods in a single class. So if you have a class that has functions that's inside it, it's enclosed between those brackets. That's what you need to know with it as well. encapsulation, ensure that the class self is self-contained. Very important with it as well. It's a common practice in object-oriented programming to make all the classes that we make the fields private. All right. So when we talk about the fields, that when we start to look at UMLs in here in a second here, you need to actually just make the fields, all the fields, private for me. Okay. And the methods that we're getting to talk about the methods will be public, will represent by a symbol called, it's a plus, and the private will be the symbol, it's kind of like a minus or a negative on there as well. Okay. So designing a class with this thing. So when you design a class, decisions made about how a class is made. What data must be accounted for, what action must be performed, and what data can be performed. Alright. And what data needs to be accessed, any rules on how the data should be modified. So we're going to talk about what's called Unified Model Language with it. Unified Model Language is pretty universal in the programming world with it, UMLs. So later on when you leave here, you can actually get in and do another, talk with another classmate, and that classmate can actually go in, talk to you about different programming language, but what you all have in common is UML. It's like a flow chart with it. Okay. On industry, we use a lot of things such as Eclipse, and we use Visio, things like that. We draw out the UML, and it generates the class for us with it as well. Let's take a look at your class and what is important here. I want to talk to you about some of the stuff with it. So, a UML class is a diagram of the graphic tools that can be aid to design a class. So you have a rectangle box with 3 rows. The first row is your class name. It's normally center. Your attributes or your fields, and that's normally we made was private. Your methods are your things that you have access to to read and write to your fields. We call those, I'm going to get ahead of you a little bit, getters and setters, or methods. Other names for that is also assessors and mutators with it. But here's the UML. UML diagram are easy to convert to Java class file. So there will be more about UML later on. I'm going to talk to you about some of the stuff later on with it. But the key thing at this time right now, that if you look at these attributes, another name for attributes are fields, make sure you put those fields are what? Fields are private. Anything attributes are private for attributes and fields. Attributes and fields are synonyms I'm using as. Methods I'm using as synonyms as what? As they're broken into 2 types of methods are what? They are called assessors and mutators, or also known as getters and setters. Methods, you have a group of all your methods that you have to access your attributes in here. Okay, so your class name should concisely reflect the name of the class represents. So if you have Hello World, well, it needs to say Hello World up here. Okay, so in a UML diagram, it do not contain what. So here are some things that does not contain. Let's make sure what it does contain. It contains the field, contains the method, it contains the class name. It does not contain like the object name. Okay, just want to clarify that. Let's look at your attributes. Attributes is the second row right here. Your attributes in this thing. So when you look at your attributes in here, and I'd like for you to see that the data elements of the class defined as the object that's instantiated from the class. Instantiate means that you are creating an object from your class. That's what that means with it. The attribute must be specific to the class and define it completely. So for example, if you look on page, let me pause here.